Name is Rudy Labelle. Most people call me Rudy, also known as Ray, to my older friends. I graduated from Seneca Vocational High School in June 1943 and was on a train going to Sampson on the 30th, which was my birthday. So I turned 18 on the train going to Sampson, New York. After boot camp, very short boot camp, about 6 weeks, they sent me to electrician school for 3 months, where I graduated and communications electrician. From there I went to Norfolk, Virginia to pick up my ship, which I was a plank owner on an LCI, which was a landing craft infantry, which was to be converted to a gunboat. We did a lot of training at Little Creek, Virginia, did our shakedown cruise off of Cape Hatteras. From there I went to, after training there with the troops and the ship, we went to Fort Pierce, Florida, where we got involved with the Navy SEALs. We worked with the Navy SEALs who were trained in clearing beaches, and we were trained to go in and support them at each invasion or every time we were needed. While we were playing football behind Seneca Vocational, and a group of us fellows that played football, we decided as soon as we were free we were going to go downtown and enlist. We went to the Air Force first. Most of us wanted to be in the Air Force naturally, but at that time you couldn't wear glasses to get in. So I didn't get in there. From there we went over to the Marines. I didn't want the Marines. I figured the Navy would be best for me because I liked water and everything. So I enlisted in the Navy. I caught my father on his lunch hour. He worked downtown at the time. He signed for me, so I enlisted at 17. Went home, naturally. My mother was upset. Well, that's basically it. That's the reason or why I went in the Navy. I was very patriotic, lived by the laws of the Scouts. And, at that time, Curtis Wright was building planes and things out for the war effort. And one of the planes went down, we could see it. Now it looks like a contrail behind the plane, but at that time it was actually a smoke plane going down. And those kind of things work on you at that age where you say the dirty bastards, to bomb Pearl Harbor the way they did. And that's another thing. When we pulled into Pearl Harbor the first time, after we got over there, where do you think we moored our ship? We were directly over the Oklahoma. Battleship Oklahoma. It was below us. We were docked over, right above it. So Pearl Harbor was still recovering, at that time. And there's still pillboxes along the beach, which we saw when we were at the rest camp, because they were afraid at one time that they were going to be invaded. And things like that you don't think about till now, Yeah. Hickam Field and all those places. They were a real mess. It was my first encounter with Portuguese man of war. And the Navy SEALs who were working on the beach, some of them came in contact with them, so we had to go in and pick them up and bring them aboard ship for sick bay. Other than that, the training involved there was basically taking the SEALs in, firing over their heads while they're working in the water, and basically that was the fundamental part of what we had to do. We were actually protecting them while they're working in the water, clearing the beaches. They're known as Navy SEALs then, now they're known as underwater demolition teams. They have separate teams that they train. But they found after one of the invasions on the island, they dropped the troops off the ship in something like 38 feet of water, and some of them weren't really trained for it, and they drowned. So that's why they started this SEAL program to clear the beachheads before the invasion. And that's what our duty was after that. From there we went From there we went to Key West, Florida. Key West, Florida, we took off and went through the Panama Canal up to San Diego. And en route there, they were training Navy pilots to land on the small carriers, the CVE, escort carriers. So all we did going up the coast was pick up the fellows that didn't make it. From there, from San Diego, we went up to San Francisco, picked up part of our fleet, and from there we went overseas. In San Francisco, we went to the Inuit Atoll, and that was cleared by then. We did some swimming and relaxation, and from there we went overseas to New Guinea. It was our first beachhead in New Guinea, at Hollandia, New Guinea. Later they set up the first aid in the hospital at New Guinea. So from there we're preparing for the invasion of Philippines. And we were at the beachhead 2 weeks before the invasion so that the troops could go in, or the SEALs could go in, clear the beaches and get everything. Then we went, laid offshore at night, went back in during the day. While they were working in the water, well, if we saw any kind of action, we'd fire over their heads and keep them down. But that was, I skipped the part where we were converted while we were in Frisco to a gunboat. That's when they put the rocket launchers on, where normally there would be ramps for the troops to get off. Those ramps were taken off and we put on the rocket launchers. And at each invasion we would go in and fire these rockets at intervals of 50 yards until all of them were expended, and pretty much you leveled the beach with these rockets. I got a couple pictures I showed. We'd make a couple runs to pick up the SEALs and hide at night or patrol at night, do whatever we had to do. Then we were there for MacArthur when he went ashore. There was a picture of our ship on one of the Life magazines, but I haven't to it. But it showed the LCIGs going in with the landing vehicle tanks going between them to make the beachhead. The tanks would go in first, then the LCPRs and all the little landing craft would take the troops in after that. So it was very well organized. I never saw so many ships gathered together as there was for that invasion of the Philippines. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And actually, at night, the sky was just like the 4th of July because the Japanese, that we were very close to the mainland. Was the LVTs going in, and they'd get hit with a mortar or whatever, and they'd just flip over, and you couldn't even stop to pick them up. You had to keep going. Now, the first time is the amount of support that you have, and the ships and the gathering. I mean, it's not just, well, actually going over, the first experience was going over in a flotilla. We're the slowest going ship, one of the top speed was 7 knots at cruising, and we'd be on the outskirts on both flanks of the troop ships that were escorting over there. And naturally, when you're getting into the areas, you're looking for mines, you're looking for floating anything, you know. And I guess the first invasion is not knowing what to expect. And you're hearing a lot of fire and you're hearing a lot of noise before you get there where your final destination is. And of course, I was just a kid. You know, you don't you don't think much about it. You're just doing what you think you're there for. I guess I don't really, I can't remember anything. I've said a lot of prayers, I know that. Especially after the first couple of invasions, you'd say, how lucky can you be? You're still here, still going. And you know you've lost other ships. The Twigs went down, and I knew one of my buddies, the Twigs, we were in when there was a small destroyer when it went down. We were there picking up survivors, and you know it was a sea of fire. You know, that's all you could see was the guys floundering around in this oil trying to get out, and that's the worst thing I think I remember. And you're pulling them out, you didn't know whether they were alive or whether they're dead, and it's an awful experience. And I think about that, and you think about the hurricanes, the rough water, and you wonder what's next. Where are we going from here? You never knew until you were en route. They never tell you. That's why I think our quartermaster went Section 8. He just knew too much. That young kid, same age as me, I mean, you know, that was his training, but we were very good friends. That's probably why I knew a little bit more than the average. But war is war, and then when you're over there because you're doing what you think is right. What else can you say? Dulag was the name of the small town right there in the Philippines. And they claim that after we hit the beach, there wasn't a living thing for the first 300 yards. So that's the story we got, yeah. You know. We lost our doctor there because he got hit with a mortar shell. Blew his hand off. He was taking pictures, which he shouldn't have been doing. I shouldn't even tell you that, but that's... so we lost our doctor. We were the flotilla commanding ship, or whatever you want to call them at the time. They called him flotilla commander. The lead officer was aboard our ship for our flotilla. There were a couple of flotillas of these gunboats that went in. It wasn't a happy sight. About 23. We were classified expendable, same as the PT boats. PT boats were just into coming and they were using them a lot more later on in the war in the South Pacific for picking them, because they were a lot faster than we were. They could go in. We used to tow a life raft behind the ship after they got through work, and we'd tow that in and pick up the SEALs and bring them back out to the ship, mothership, wherever they were. But that was my initial real engagement, you know. Well, we went just after Tacloban is when we heard about the Navy Sea battle at Midway. That was just north of us. We heard about that, so that was kind of the turning point, I think, of the war, in my opinion, because we'd hear all kinds of stories out there, you know. Tokyo Rose was telling us all. Well, you just lost another ship, and I don't know why you fellows are fighting and all that kind of stuff, because you're losing the war, you know, little things like that. But it's all we had to listen to. She'd play all our music, you know. We'd listen to it for the music. Well, I'll Walk Alone. That was... oh, sure, all propaganda. You didn't believe anything she was saying, but she'd say how many ships were down, and we only lost 2 planes, and you knew damn well you lost dozens of the kamikazes coming in. You knew damn well you're losing them. We were in patrol. Well, anyway, from there, we went to Manila, Lingayen Gulf, and that's where we started working. The PT boats were working with us as well, because they were kind of protecting. They were afraid that there were other ships coming down from Japan, but we never saw any. After Lingayen Gulf, then we went to a small atoll called the Mapia Atoll, where they had a weather station set up, and we worked with a Limey, a British or Australian cruiser who was in charge of that invasion, and that was a small atoll of 3 islands, and the Navy, or I say the Navy, it's actually Marines, flew over and dropped pamphlets and circulars telling the natives to get off the island because we were going to invade it. So we did the same thing there as we did at the other beaches. We cleared the beach. They went in. They only found 13 Japanese there, and they all committed hara-kiri. They dug a ditch or whatever and committed hara-kiri so they wouldn't be surrendered. But we took the island, and it was so well fortified. It was all dug in with trenches, and they must have evacuated them, or because there weren't any natives on the island at that time. It was just these 13 Japanese that they found, and we were talking to the SEALs afterward and everything. And then we got a chance to go ashore, but we were told not to go in any of the bunkers or the holes because they could be set up for, what do I want to say? If you trip a wire, it'd blow up or whatever, you know. So we were told not to go in. But I have some of the relics that I picked up if you want to look at them.
Sure.
After we did that invasion, we went to Okinawa, or prepared for Okinawa. We took some of the wounded back to New Guinea, and then we came back, and we went to Naha. That was Easter Sunday, the invasion. But we were there 2 weeks before the invasion. At Okinawa, we used to go to a small group of islands called Karamaretta, which was offshore, where we hid at night from the suicide planes that come in. Then after the invasion of Naha on Easter Sunday, we did patrol duty around the island. We were each stationed to patrol around the island so that the Japanese kamikazes that were coming down, we would act as like a wall around the island just to protect the troops that were going in and taking. Then we went to the other side of the island as a mock invasion, but we never hit there. And while we were there, a small island off the coast of Okinawa called Aishima is where Ernie Pyle was killed. We were there when he was killed. You probably read, you wouldn't be old enough to know that, but it's in the books, you know. He was killed riding on a jeep in Aishima, which is a small island off the coast of Okinawa. And the invasion on the other side of the island was where you probably heard about all the cliffs on Okinawa, and they had caves dug in, and we had to go in and try and eliminate those caves because they were hiding in there. So, but that's when a lot of the flamethrowers and things came into play after they took over. It's a messy war, like anything else. The first 300 yards of the beach, flat. Nothing. Especially, well, I'll show you these rocket launchers. And every 50 yards or so, 50, 75 yards. And you weren't that far off the beach yourself because we could land on the beach if we had to. But we'd go in almost to the shore before we turned around. So you can imagine there couldn't be much left if you get 12 of these gunboats all going in at the same time and just blum, 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 blum. You know that. There's 12 in each rocket launcher, and there's, I think there's 21, 24. The first time I've asked that, somebody asked me a question. I can show you a picture. I think there's 12 on the side, and there's 4 here, so there's 48 launchers here and 48 launchers here. And each one of the launchers held 9 anti-personnel rifles. Oh, yeah, there's air support. Most of the invasions, they do the bombing and everything beforehand. And a lot of dogfights overhead, especially around Okinawa afterwards. There was dogfights. And at night, was the worst time because they'd come in out of the sun, the kamikazes, and you just, you know, we lost a couple sister ships there. But I guess the air support was there mostly, but they're off the carriers. They were doing mostly inland in preparation for the advancement of the Marines, for the Army.
So after, I'm just curious, after you guys cleared the beaches, were you required to go ashore too, or was your
We
job?
weren't required to, but if the beachhead was secured, we could go ashore. We went ashore at Mapia, especially because they didn't find anything. But I was ashore at Aishima afterwards. We didn't get ashore at Naha because we did patrol duty from then on after the initial invasion. That was L Day. We just did patrol duty around the island. We were there just to keep the kamikazes from hitting the beaches. And L Day was Invasion Day, Easter Sunday. That was a Cold War day, I guess they used at that time. That's all I remember at that time. Communications, I heard a lot more than most of them did because I had to take care of the communications aboard the ship, as well as the rocket launchers were my primary concern, according to the skipper. His name was Flory, Casey Flory. He wanted those rocket launchers ready to go at a minute's notice, and you had to keep the battery, everything up to snuff for him. But he was a good skipper.
What was quarters like on the ship? And what was it like to?
Very cramped. All you had was ammo all around you. Yeah, it's, well, the ship wasn't that big either. But we slept in drop down. Well, it was comfortable. It wasn't bad. Yeah. There was no, all you had was a mess hall. That's all. There was no other areas you could go out, sit on the fantail or up forward at forecastle when you're underway, you know. But beautiful. I loved warm weather anyway. But, oh yeah, it was always, well, weather was great except for a couple of typhoons we went through. We lost one of our sister ships in a typhoon because we were the last ship to get refueled. And if you didn't have fuel, you couldn't head into it. And if you didn't head into it, you were just bobbing around like a cork and it capsized. We only picked up 2 survivors off that ship out of 300 men. You have to head into them. And with a flat, we were the smallest going flat bottom ship in that time. We're the shortest one, flat bottom. And you'd look up at these humongous swells 60 foot high, and you'd go up like this. And scarier. You'd never want to forget. You can't forget that sort of thing. Scary. Even though you knew you could swim, you wouldn't have a chance. Oh, let's see, what else can I tell you? Okinawa. When the war ended, we went back to Hawaii, and then I got shipped back I had a 30-day leave, and I got shipped right back to the West Coast. That's when I went aboard a destroyer after the war ended, and we were on what they call red carpet duty, picking up troops from all over, taking them to the AKAs or APAs, personnel carriers, and taking them back to the States. So, and I was a left arm rate, which meant you had to maintain the ship. The other right arm rates, they were let go first, they were discharged first. But that was basically the tour of duty. What else can I tell you? Well, the 2 cooks that we had and the steward, they were 20 millimeter. They operated the 20 anti-aircraft guns when they weren't in the kitchen and on duty. And I had 50 caliber machine gun where I had to go in case we needed it. But most of the time, I was in taking care of the batteries during invasion and let's see, the radio operators. There were two of those that were on duty. We did have a doctor. He had got injured, and a lady, so Doc McDonald, he was a what do we call him? First aid.
Like a medic.
Medic, yeah. He was a medic aboard ship. He took on a gun when we didn't have other things to do. Signalman, that's another thing that brings back memory. We had two signalmen aboard ship, and both of them were afraid of heights. So I had to climb up the mast, pull their lanyards out because I had radar up there on the mast, and didn't bother me, so I'd have to go up and get their lanyards every time they got strung up. It made me mad because these were signalmen. They're supposed to be the part of their job, but they couldn't stand. They knew this before, but they didn't know how to climb a mast. But that was funny, I think. But let's see, who else? Well, you had one yeoman, one man, the quartermaster, Bill Flynn. He was from St. Louis. He knew more about what was going on and everything because he was up on home with the skipper, everybody. But he went Section 8. We had to transfer him off. Let's see. I don't know who else would be except you got the motor machinist. You got two or three of them. The motor masters. You got two signalmen, two radio operators. Everybody had a position on the. If you weren't loading the guns, you were doing something else. The radar that we had was very basic. It was the first days of radar. I mean, it was just one of the first things we had. And mostly all you could tell by looking at the scope was the shoreline. Give the skipper information on how far you were from the shore, that sort of thing. But a flight of seagulls would show up as a blip, You'd have to report that, and they'd say, we don't see anything, But that kind of thing, made it funny. But no, watching the radar during the invasion was my most part, and you could see these LVTs going in and stuff like this, making a small wake in the water. One of the atolls there, the skipper backed the ship right up on the reef after they got a couple of torpedoes. Well, we had to go in and salvage the papers. We went ashore, and the dead were still laying on the deck. They didn't even recover the bodies yet. That's scary. That's the thing you don't want to remember. And
like
he
you said,
salvaged the ship, but you don't know how many were killed at that time. But it's those things you don't remember. You don't want to remember. Remember I said L Day, Love Day. April 1st, Easter Sunday, Love Day. We lined up with the largest amount of L3IGs to make a salt I have yet to see. Made the run accompanied with naval and air pounding. Really blasted hell out of the place. Tanks made a landing with no resistance. We turned from beach and glad to say no casualties. April 5th, we are on patrol duty working with Army to protect seaplanes and give more firepower and support if needed at Caramoretto. Still have no word as to when we will leave here. Hope soon. Continued this patrol for 3 days. Glow and Roland went on beach with Army one day, went on patrol. That don't make sense. Well, went on beach with Army one day on patrol. April 7th, went over and salvaged what we needed off a tin can that was blown in half and up on the reef. That's what I was telling you about. That was in 584, the Halligan. We could only board on Fantail, which was above water. Few dead bodies around, and ship was in a hell of a shape. We're told after we got back aboard that we had been assigned to number 116 Patrol Station, otherwise known as Suicide Alley, or Bomb Alley. After we got there, we did regular routine of going back and forth as anti-boat patrol. April 8th, still patrolling an assignment area at 1835. We had a suicide plane came, dive at us from port quarter and swung around starboard side. Landed, exploded just off the bow, about 35 yards off. All debris, water, etc. showered decks along with parts of engine cowling. I had to change to fire for first time at Jap plane, and the damn thing jammed after 6 rounds got off. I was scared as hell, just like everyone else. The rest of the evening went by okay. Kamikazes usually came in first thing in the morning, or usually early evening when the sun was in your eyes, one way or the other. We took one hit. They got him before he hit the ship, but he wiped out one of our 40 millimeter emplacements, and most of the boys in it were wound up in the hospital. And saw an awful lot of Hellcats, Corsairs, and tangling with the kamikazes when they're coming in, naturally. We saw an awful lot of that. We'd pick up survivors, pilots if we could when they come in, if we could catch them and find them. But there aren't, kamikazes are just, they just had enough fuel to get there, and there was no return for them, and it's blood for the emperor, or whatever they said. And we were showing all kinds of movies on being able to identify them, of the different types of planes that they use. They usually had one bomb aboard, and that's about it. They didn't even have, they didn't even fire their guns at you with the small arms, Philly, what would be 29 millimeter for theirs, which was popular. We had 50 millimeter. But they never fired. They just aimed it for a ship, and that's it. We had several of them that went down in the drink, before they got to the ship. But we only had one that came in close enough to, and he dove just before and the wing came down and wiped out the emplacement, the 40 millimeter crew. We had 40 millimeter on both sides, starboard and port side, as well as on the nose, and that was our largest, biggest ammunition. We had 50 calibers up on the tower, and 50 calibers on the tail, on the fantails. I've got pictures of prisoners we took. I've got some I can show you. One of the other things that I didn't mention was when we were on patrol, we had to worry about small boats coming in, motorboats loaded with, they plow right into the ship and blow you up. They were like, I don't know whether some of them were Japanese or what they were, but they were suicide boats, we called them. And I got some of those prisoners. And we'd make them completely undressed before they got out of their boats, if we did take them prisoner. Make them completely undressed, because they'd hide them in their arms, in between their legs, like that. We made them get out. They could get dressed when they come back. And we got some of the prisoners. We transfer them. We put them on an APA or an AKA, one of those ships, and then they'd do whatever they do with them. But those kind of things you just kind of take for granted. You don't think about it until you ask about it. I can't say that I noticed, we didn't understand them, number one. But the natives that came ashore, or came aboard, they were happy to, because we fed them first, I don't recall any change in disposition or change in character. They were talking an awful lot amongst themselves. Of course, we didn't understand them a lot. But to an AKA or an APA, one of these transports, they take the prisoners. And we just, the closest ship that we could get rid of them, we got rid of them because we didn't have room for them. They had to sleep in the well deck, you know, if we had to keep them overnight. And we had a guard on them all 24 hours. Yeah, definitely. Of course, we didn't find the suicide bomber. The pilots, we didn't see much of them. They were pretty well blown to bits, you know. We never picked up a pilot from one of those kamikazes. I can't help but think that if they went in to drink, that was good for them, you know. So much for you, you were out of our way. But we have a different attitude, don't we? I still have a hard time thinking that the Japanese are welcome here and everything else, you know. But that's something you got to overcome. At 0515, we were called to general quarters, and about 0700, a Val, that's an aircraft type, was sighted. We fired 40s, and it came in on our starboard side, another suicide. It came in from starboard with 20s and 40s and 50s firing, and crossed over ship and hit the water and exploded less than 25 yards from my gun and me, who was sprawled out on the deck. I was unable to fire my gun. Everything flew on deck from the explosion, including parts of the Jap. Scrapped 2 pieces off for my helmet. What a mess on deck. Those planes just disintegrate on hitting the water. Boy, I sure hope to see no more of that type of fighting. The rest of the day proved calm. April 11, went to Port Bolo after morning GQ, then returned to station and did regular patrol as usual. April 12th, had a Tony come in at morning GQ along on port side, didn't fire. Ship ahead fired, and he really shagged along. I don't know what I meant there. Went down to Point Bolo, took on water, and we're on our way back when we saw 9 planes shot down, 3 hit by Corsairs and hit the drink. 3 suicides tried to get a DE. I'm not sure, but I think none of them hit the ship. At least it didn't look like it. Stayed at GQ for 4 hours. In early evening, we went over to a transport area to lay smoke. Just heard same DE was being attacked, and again by 3 more planes. Stayed in the area all night. April 13th, same old patrol at 116, and for the next 3 nights we screened transports in Nagawan Bay. April 15th, had artillery fire from hills thrown at us, so we, all ships, moved out of the bay. On the other side of Okinawa, there was one day was called back next day. Went back to Karamaretta, repairs at the big ship. DD's graveyard, rewiring rockets. I think another operation is coming up. Received, May 7th, received word over radio that Germany surrenders unconditionally. We are still at Karamaretta laying smoke and I think awaiting orders. May 13th, Mother's Day. Went to Mass and Communion first time since Christmas. Here in Karamaretta, 2 planes went down, saw both and fired at the second one. 2 fellas, Schweitzer and Melvin, left for the States. Expect to leave here most any time. May 21st, while we're looking for a ship, in here we run into anchored LSM for the hole in the port side at the radio shack, still at Port Bolo. 26th, First night back out on patrol off of Naha. On southern end of island at 05:30 in the morning, sighted a Q-boat. We circled and opened up with 40s. First, then everything. Hit him with at 40 yards, at about 1,200 yards away. 422 came up and helped sink him. We couldn't trust them because they were loaded with, just try to ram the ship, do anything they could. At Caramarado, June 7th. Zeffro, Vinersky, Farrar were given their Purple Hearts, awarded by Mr. Flory. Iglo was awarded Bronze Star for work at Saipan. There were quite a few guys that got. June 9th, went on patrol off Naha, picked up a small boat on radar. At 01:30, investigated and picked up 7 Jap prisoners who were trying to get off the island. Sank boat and proceeded to resume patrol. We'll transfer prisoners in the morning. When the war was over, we were on our way back to Hawaii for rest camp for the third time. We had gone back twice before. I got a lot of pictures of the rest camp, but you weren't supposed to take pictures otherwise during the war. We were on our way back, and the pharmacist mate broke out the alcohol that we used to rub down switchboard and stuff, and we each got a couple of shots of alcohol in our coffee. That was about it. When we got back to Hawaii, naturally, there was a big parade, and I got some pictures. I didn't take them, but they're just pictures of the parade, VJ Day in Hawaii. And I stayed at the Royal Hawaiian, which was one of the nicest places for rest camp. But the first couple of rest camps were on the north end of north end of the island, and I got some pictures to show you the fellows that when we were in rest camp. We got sent back twice during our tour over there. We'd go back for a week of rest, just relaxation, drink a few beers, horseback riding. But there's a lot of things that you just can't forget. When the war was over and I was serving aboard the destroyer, one of the things, we went up to Shanghai, the Wangpu River, to Shanghai, the Yangtze River to the Wangpu. Shanghai's there. And we went ashore, naturally, to visit some of the bars. And we walked into one little bar, little narrow, long place. On the far end was a little balcony, and they were playing One Meatball. I didn't expect that in Shanghai, But that's the rest camp. One of the fellows from Massachusetts, Tillicella, his name was, never rode a horse before. And stay off the pavement, Shaky. Don't go on the pavement with the horse. Well, he was out there. Well, naturally, he'd ride a horse on the pavement, Well, he wound up with it hanging on his neck, upside down. I can picture him. That's just funny. He was a motorman aboard ship. And I have to give those guys a lot of credit. They kept those diesels running through everything. Especially my rank and some of the other left arm rates to re-up because they were going to use in a weak talk that told as a proving ground for some of the atomic weir. Because naturally, the atomic bomb, when we heard that they dropped the first one, well, that was a big celebration aboard ship, that we'd gotten that far, and Truman decided to use it. But no, it's. I was going to sign up if I could have got in the. I think it was the RV5 program at that time, where you could have got pilot training, and that's what I really wanted. But I didn't sign up again. We talk. they didn't, what did they call that? It was a code name for that operation that we talked at the time. I forget what it was. They wouldn't tell you an awful lot about it, except that you want to re-up, you'll be assigned. I forget what it was. I probably got it written in one of my logs. But I was accepted to go to training, but then the war ended and I didn't go. I went to work for Western Electric Telephone Company, installing telephone switchboards for New York Tel. I worked at 65 Franklin Street in the AT&T office for some time, and I worked all over Western New York, as far as Corning, Hornell, and I was in charge man on all these jobs. And my wife and I got married in '47, and we had an apartment on the Urban Street in Buffalo, and I was working at the AT&T office at the time in downtown Buffalo. And Frank Berry, my supervisor, said, "Rudy, you got to go to Corning, New York, and help out Joe Arpine because they're putting a new switchboard." I said, "Well, I just got my apartment here." I said, "Am I going to be there a while?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "You're going to be there quite a while, so you might as well give up the apartment." So I gave up my apartment, went to Corning, worked down there with Joe for 3 weeks, I think it was. I found a place down there for my wife and I, and I got a phone call from Rudy, "You got to come back. National Aniline in South Buffalo. They wiped out the switchboard. They had a fire." I said, "Jack, I just got here." He said, "Well, we got to put in," this is after I'd been there with the company for a while, of course. But anyway, he said, "You got to come back." He said, "Joe Arpine is getting some more help from Massachusetts, so you don't have to worry about it." I said, "That isn't a point." I said, "Where am I going to live?" I said, "I gave up my apartment." So we lived at Crystal Beach until I found a house. And my wife's aunt had a cottage over there, so we stayed over at Crystal Beach for, all of that summer, 3 months. And I bought a house on Richfield Avenue in South Buffalo. And after I got back, I went in and told Jack, I said, "Jack, I'm leaving." He said, "Why?" I said, "Friends of mine at Bell Aerospace want me to come out and work if I want to." And I said, "I don't want that to happen to me again. Leave here and give up my home and everything." I said, "This way I'll be home." Oh, well. I went to work at Bell. I worked at Bell. And I did traveling with them. I went back and forth to White Sands, Alamogordo, New Mexico. We designed and built test equipment for the Korean War effort at that time. Worked at Bell for about 8 years, I think. And what did I do then? Oh, then I bought a store in Ellicottville. I left Bell. Holiday Valley was just starting at that time. So my brother-in-law said, "Why don't you buy this little store Gardner Annis has got?" You know Gardner? Did you know Gardner? Gardner Annis is going to be the postmaster in town, so he's selling his store. And the valley's just starting. It'd be a great opportunity to have a business here. And I said, "Okay, so we can." I only had it 2 years. I was working 12, 14 hours a day and not making any money or doing anything. So I left there. I went bankrupt, actually, in the store and gas station. And sent my resumes out, went to work for Moog in East Aurora. You probably know about Moog. I worked there 9 years. And there was talk about, at that time, that Marine Midland was taking over the company. They were having financial problems. So I went back to work at Bell. They asked me to come back and subcontract. So I went back to Bell. From there on out, it's just been raising a family and doing everything. I retired from Fisher-Price Toys. I went from Bell to Cornell Labs, worked at Cornell Labs, And Cornell Labs was, we started a new division, a fingerprint division, where they could analyze fingerprints, put it on a computer. They did that for the FBI in Washington. We got that going, and that kind of faded out. And I went from there to Fisher-Price. Retired from Fisher-Price. But I kept our place here. We moved here in 58, 59. Went to Moog, came back. And we came out here in 77, right after the blizzard. The place got broken into a couple times. Vandalized this house. We had to make up our mind whether we were going to live East Aurora or come out here, so we sold our place in there and moved out here. So I've been out here ever since. And I drove back and forth to East Aurora at Fisher-Price for 9 years till I retired. I've been retired over 20 years now. Where does the time go? Holy cow.